Hi, welcome to the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. I'm Dr. Izabella Wentz, your host, and I'm so excited to have you here today. Today, I'm going to be sharing about where to start with Hashimoto's if you've been diagnosed and give you a little bit of insight on what is going on with Hashimoto's and why you need to do a little bit more, sometimes a lot more, than just take thyroid hormones to feel your best. I hope this conversation is healing on your journey. So, what's really going on in Hashimoto's? If you've been diagnosed with this condition, which sounds like a rare Japanese sword fighter, but is actually quite common, affecting 1 in 5 women at some point in their lives, you might be wondering, what's the big deal? Other than just to take thyroid meds, is there anything else that you need to do? Now, perhaps you've gone down the road of taking thyroid meds already and you still don't feel human. If this is you, this podcast episode is going to be great for you. And you may have guessed, and you may have guessed correctly, that I'm somebody that became a thyroid expert after my own thyroid challenges, right? So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in my 20s and subclinical hypothyroidism. I was already a practicing pharmacist at that time. And I thought, okay, this is great. I can take thyroid meds for this. This is going to make me feel so much better. So, spoiler alert, the thyroid medications didn't help me all that much. So I went from sleeping 12 hours to 11 hours. That was a bit of an improvement, but I was still having a lot of the symptoms like brain fog, fatigue, anxiety, panic attacks, carpal tunnel in both arms, irritable bowel syndrome, acid reflux, hair loss, and so much more. I was just like chronically exhausted, barely making it home after an 8-hour workday and just spending most of my life sitting on a couch. I was this highly ambitious person and very motivated person, but yet I was too exhausted to like follow through on any of my ambitions. So what I came to figure out is that there were other things going on rather than just that underactive thyroid that can be treated with thyroid hormone that were leading me to have all of these symptoms. A big part of this is because Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition. And so there's this autoimmune inflammation happening in the body. Of course, it's directed at the thyroid gland, but it could also be directed at other parts of the body. There are also consequences of dysthyroidism, as it's called. And that essentially means when your body has been hypothyroid for a while, you might end up with some imbalances, and just taking thyroid hormone isn't going to magically resolve those imbalances. One example is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Hypothyroidism slows down our digestive tract, allowing for bacteria to grow within our small intestine, which can then cause symptoms like irritable bowel syndrome. As many as like 30% of people with irritable bowel syndrome actually have Hashimoto's in the early stages of hypothyroidism. And then there's the things that actually caused you to develop autoimmunity in the first place. These are going to be related to various triggers. So they could be chronic infections, they could be food sensitivities, they can be toxins that are in your system. Additionally, they could be an impaired ability to handle stress. So how do you like unpack all of this and, what the heck is going on? In my experience, the categories of things that we need to address when a person has Hashimoto's is, of course, going to be that hypothyroidism. If they're at a point where they need thyroid hormones, we do absolutely want to replace the thyroid hormones. This is going to be one of the quickest ways to feel better. Generally speaking, most doctors will give you thyroid medications when your TSH is above 10. There are indications for supplementing with thyroid hormones much earlier. One of them is if you're trying to have children. Another one is if, you're symptomatic. If you're somebody that has thyroid symptoms and thyroid antibodies, such as thyroid peroxidase antibodies or thyroglobulin antibodies, And even if your TSH is somewhere in that 2 to 10 range, I would actually advocate for utilizing thyroid medications. Are there ways to address thyroid dysfunction without medications? In some early stages, yes, absolutely. The few things I advocate for are going to be red light therapy over the thyroid gland. I also advocate for utilizing selenium and myo-inositol. In some cases, that can normalize subclinical hypothyroidism, not in every case. Adrenal support can be very, very helpful with this, as well as the low iodine approach in some cases. I'm going to have Dr. Alan Christensen on the podcast to speak about the low iodine approach, so please tune in for that. The other thing beyond thyroid hormones that I really love to focus on is nutrient deficiencies. Oftentimes, people with hypothyroidism are going to be deficient in many, many nutrients. The most common ones are going to be B12, vitamin D, selenium, iron, and thiamine, as well as magnesium. In many cases, I'm advocating for proper testing. Vitamin D, B12, and ferritin are the 3 tests that I recommend most people to get when they have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. Any of these 3 being off can lead to thyroid fatigue, even if you're on like the perfect dose of thyroid medications, and as well as other thyroid symptoms. I'll give you some examples. So ferritin, generally speaking, you want your levels between 90 and 110. This is an iron storage protein, and when that's too low, you're not going to be able to utilize your thyroid hormone properly, and you could be dealing with hair loss, you could be dealing with brain fog, cold intolerance, fatigue, restless leg syndrome, air hunger, all kinds of symptoms. And the tricky thing is that most doctors don't test for this, so you do need to request that you get a ferritin test. Vitamin D is such an important nutrient for every single autoimmune condition. The studies have shown that most people with hypothyroidism tend to be vitamin D deficient. And in my experience, getting those vitamin D levels between 60 and 80 is going to be incredibly helpful for getting Hashimoto's into remission. This is where most of my ladies with Hashimoto's have their vitamin D levels. This is something that I oftentimes recommend testing more than once. So you test it initially, and if you're low, you're going to want to supplement anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 international units of vitamin D can restore your levels. My favorite way to get your vitamin D levels up is actually a destination to a sunny place and doing a beach vacation. This is a great way to get your vitamin D levels up because we do absorb it through the skin. This allows us to make our own vitamin D internally. And the other thing that I oftentimes recommend testing is B12. When your B12 levels are low, you can have a lot of fatigue and a lot of neurological issues. The reference ranges can say that 200 is normal, but really you want your level somewhere at around 700. I'm going to have a link in the show notes to my article about these deficiencies, as well as a place where you can self-order the labs, Ulta Labs, where if your doctor for some reason isn't able or willing to order the labs, or perhaps you have a high deductible, you can actually self-order this. And in some cases, your insurance might reimburse you. Please check with your insurance before you order it. And then you're like, Izabella, you said this was covered and it's not. So this is an option for you. I've set this up to help people take charge of their own health. And the other nutrients that I commonly advocate for are going to be magnesium if you've got like stomach cramps, any kind of cramps, trouble sleeping, if you've got constipation. Magnesium citrate is going to be your best friend. It can be incredibly helpful. Selenium and myo-inositol are 2 additional nutrients that are very, very helpful. I typically see people with anxiety and hair loss. When they bring these 2 on board, they feel significantly better. And then thiamine. Thiamine has been studied in a very, very small group of people to resolve thyroid fatigue. I think it was a case study of 3 people where 600 milligrams of thiamine was able to reverse their thyroid fatigue in 3 to 5 days. Generally speaking, if you have low blood pressure, this is going to be an indication that you might benefit from this. Now, I've recommended thiamine to so many people over the years, and I've written articles about it that people have found online, and it has been remarkable in how effective it is for resolving that thyroid fatigue in 3 to 5 days. I've had people on like disability that were able to come off of disability and start working again and enjoy their life because thiamine gave them their brain function and their energy back. This is a really big one that I encourage you to look into. And I'm also going to link my article in the show notes all about thiamine and what it can do for your thyroid. I'm also super excited to have Elliot Overton, a worldwide expert on thiamine, join the podcast, where he'll be sharing about the different types of thiamine we can use and how to properly use it. Beyond nutrient deficiencies, which are a fantastic place to start, I'm oftentimes advocating for addressing food sensitivities. The most common foods that can be problematic for Hashimoto's are going to be gluten, dairy, and soy. I find that symptoms vanish within 3 to 5 days when people are off of these foods. For me personally, it was acid reflux, carpal tunnel, and irritable bowel syndrome that went away within 3 days when I got off of gluten, dairy. The soy, I didn't quite figure out until later, and that really helped me with my anxiety and brain function. I've had people say like asthma symptoms, acne symptoms, digestive symptoms, brain symptoms really, really improve when they do an elimination diet. Again, there's a lot of different elimination diets out there. A great place for people to start is getting rid of those 3 foods: gluten, dairy, and soy, as well as focusing on blood sugar balance. For blood sugar balance, I'm a big advocate for, generally speaking, eating more protein and eating more fat, like good fats, and fewer carbs compared to the standard American diet. This just helps to balance our blood sugar. Fiber is also incredibly helpful for that. I used to have whey protein like every day before my Hashimoto's diagnosis. And this is a dairy protein. I didn't realize that it was causing me to have irritable bowel syndrome and acid reflux. And for the longest time, I didn't have a protein powder that I could use in place of whey that was Hashimoto's friendly until I came across hydrolyzed beef protein. And so I was able to create the first unflavored hydrolyzed beef protein on the market in 2017 through Rootology. I now offer 3 flavors for those of you that may want a little bit more flavoring: vanilla as well as chocolate. So head over to rootology.com to check that out if you're looking for a clean protein that's Hashimoto's friendly. So beyond nutrients and blood sugar balance, there are some additional things you might want to consider. This would be managing your stress response. This would be supporting your liver detox pathways, as well as chronic infections. We can get into those a little bit deeper in future podcast episodes, but I'm hopeful that this episode will give you some great things to start with on your healing journey. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope this has been incredibly healing on your journey.